Welcome to Yachting Yarns. I'm Linda Woods. I created these podcasts for anyone who likes getting out on the water, not just yachts, but all types of boats. In this episode, I'm speaking with Tanya Raby, who has some good advice for pet owners, in particular dog owners who want their pets to share in their love of boating. Tanya has created an online community called Dogs Who Sail, where like-minded people can share their experiences. So welcome, Tanya. Let's talk about your two great passions, your two loves, dogs and boats.
Well, maybe three, actually.
Yes.
I can't forget Anthony. So Anthony comes first, my partner. And then I have sailing, which is a huge love of mine, and also dogs.
You love dogs so much you've actually started a whole movement, because a lot of people who sail have dogs.
That's right. So I've been sailing now for 6 years, and when we first started, we moved on board with two aging Cocker Spaniels. And I was a pedantic mother, like I overprotective mother. So Max and Mel, they were over 10 years old, both of them. And so I wanted to make sure that they were going to be fine on the boat. And what I found was I was Googling for information and there wasn't a lot out there. So I started to research by talking to other people and then documenting our own experiences. And yeah, I thought, well, I'm not the only one who's got dogs on boats or wanting to have a dog on a boat. So I started Dogs Who Sail.
A lot of people have dogs on boats. They sail around the world with boats. What are the most common things people want to know?
Well, there's one that is always talked about in the Dogs Who Sail community, and that is toileting. People always ask you, where does the dog go to the toilet on the boat? And it's a fair question. So that is the biggest question people ask. Yeah.
And the answer is?
Well, there's a few answers. So what I found and what we share with other people is to get a fake grass. So you buy them from a hardware store and it's the fake turf, 1 metre by 1 metre. The one that we got had the rubber backing on the bottom. You punch a couple of holes in there, put in a floating rope, and pop that somewhere on the boat, and it's usually on the bow for a monohull, and I believe the cats use it as well there. And when the dogs do their business, then you can just dangle it over the side of the boat.
And they adjust to that easily?
Well, it depends on the dog. And this is where every dog is so different. They're so unique, and yeah, we kind of set Max and Mel up as best we could. So before we took them onto the boat, we bought the pee mat and left it on the yard at home, where we knew every single morning Mel in particular would go to the same place.
You kind of get them used to it, so it doesn't matter. It's just wherever that piece of grass is.
That's right.
Whether it's in the yard or on the boat.
That's right.
They just associate.
So it had her scent, and wherever Mel went to the toilet, Maxie was following. So we knew that we wouldn't have a problem with him as long as we got Mel engaged first. So even though we had this happening and the mat was soaked and we had to drive 45 minutes from our house to where the marina was at the time with this smelly mat in the car, but it really helped us. We put it on the bow and the dogs used it straight away. So we were very lucky. But there's quite a few people in the Dogs Who Sail community who have the problem where their dog will not go on the boat. They will not use the mat, and they will only go to land.
Oh, well, that could be a problem if you're out at sea for a few days.
That's right.
So what do you do then? Well,
yeah, I really encourage people to consider how their dog is going to be, especially if they won't go to the toilet. I wouldn't ask anybody to hold on for 2 days.
Or 17.
Yeah, that's right. So
not every dog is suitable as a boat dog, really?
Well, no, they're not. And that's yeah, that's something that we really need to consider, because we have the dog and we expect them to follow the dream, our dreams, and it just might not be a good situation for them.
What sort of problems do dog owners find when they move their dog from the backyard to the ocean?
So some of the common problems are, I guess, getting used to the noise. So starting up engines is, it's not familiar to the dog. It is noisy on some boats. We actually met a man who we looked at the first boat and asked him why he was selling, and he said, because my dog doesn't like the sound of the engine.
Wow.
Yeah, so
that's a dog lover.
That is, and he did. He loved that dog, and it just wasn't working out. He thought over time the dog would get used to the noise, but it never happened. As a dog lover, and I really do advocate, the welfare of dogs. I take my hat off to him for making that brave decision, because, he could have just as easily have said, nope, I'm having the boat and I'm surrendering the dog, or, that's a concern. But mostly I find, like, you've got seasickness as well.
Oh, yes, of course.
They're just like us. So, but what I have found, and in talking with vet Sheridan, Sheridan's a sailing vet, and she was saying that commonly with seasickness and dogs, it'll happen on the first couple of times and then they will get over it, which thankfully happened with Mel. Maxie was fine, and Harry is just, so Harry's our new dog, and he copes quite well.
What about other safety aspects? I mean, you wouldn't want to have the dog go overboard.
Course. Yes, so that's, that is probably...
After they've been to the toilet, then you don't want to have them knocked off by the boom.
And this is it. So dogs,
people go overboard.
People do, and dogs do as well. There's one very famous dog in Australia, Sophie Tucker. So this was, oh my gosh, probably 10 to 15 years ago now. Sophie fell overboard up in Mackay, and she was pretty much thought that she wouldn't survive because of the area with sharks, and where was she going to get to land, and currents, and
how long can your dog paddle?
That's right. Yeah, so she was pretty much declared as
lost.
Yeah.
Heartbreaking.
Yes, and it was for them, and even for me reading the story.
Tell me it has a happy ending.
It does have a happy ending. And she was found on an island about 6 months later.
6 months?
I think it was 6 months. We have to check.
Was she half the size?
So this scrawny dog had been noticed on the islands. Over time, she had fattened up. So I believe that she was getting some of the wild goats up there and surviving.
Goats?
But when she was picked up and taken back to land, and the owners were notified saying, we think we've got your dog, and they came down and the dog just went berserk. Yeah, she knew the owners and...
Probably never thought she was going to see them again.
That's right.
So how do you stop a dog from going overboard? You can't have it on a leash all the time.
Not all the time. So the first thing that I encourage people to do is to get a life jacket for the dog. Now, there are some great companies out there who do support, like this is their thing. They create life jackets for these trekking dogs and water dogs.
They're high vis, and
that's right.
And they fit them, and
yeah. So there are different qualities. This is insurance to me. So it's life insurance for the dog. So the ones you want it to fit properly, fit firmly, and the most important thing is they have a rest that comes under the chin, because if you're out there paddling, your dog's out there paddling and they get tired, their head will drop into the water.
Oh.
So
I hadn't thought of that.
yeah,
Just
so
the weight of the head, and then
the weight of the head, yeah.
Yeah.
And so this chin rest, when they're floating, the rest will hold the chin up. So, and there's some cheap ones that are on eBay that haven't got those things. They're pretty much just a pad across the back of the dog, a piece of foam across the back of the dog, and that's not going to save them.
So you've got to get the one with the chin rest.
You need the one with the chin rest. And
you have one that you will recommend.
yeah, so the one that I recommend is the Roughwear brand, just because they really devote their time, they research, they get the best materials, and yeah, they're specifically made for trekking dogs.
So what sort of things can you do to your boat that will make it a bit more dog friendly?
What we did, and what many people do, is get some lifeline netting. So that goes around the entire rails of the boat on the lifeline. It's like a fence. So it's a great way to keep dogs in and kids in.
Of course. Well, I interviewed a woman who actually nearly went overboard. The only thing that saved her was that there were 2 railings on the boat instead of just the one.
Yes.
So she was able to grab it. If it had only been one railing, she would have gone over.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
even for big people,
That's
that
right.
netting sounds like a good idea.
It is a good idea, and I feel like I love it for myself now as well. I just feel safe when it's on there. Yeah, as well as tethering the dog. If you are travelling, the seas are rough, and the dog is in the cockpit with you, tether that dog so that it is safe and it's not being moved around. And then what also you can do apart from tethering is having the cage. You have the crate for the dog, and if it's really rough seas, pop the dog in the crate and have that crate in a secured spot inside the boat.
I think that once they get in the water, the sharks are going to go, dinner.
That's right. Well, they are, and I guess it depends on where they fall in. A shark could be thinking that they've got a feed. So.
Got an allergic noise, just pull it up, I suppose. What happens when people are travelling with dogs on board and they go to foreign countries and a whole quarantine, or that's got to be a bit of an issue?
It's a big problem, especially here in Australia. We have one of the strictest quarantine rules for animals. So if you're coming into Australia, there's a 10-day quarantine period, and that is down in Melbourne. So a lot of boats will come into Queensland, have to then send their dogs down to Melbourne for quarantine.
Really?
For 10 days.
They won't do it anywhere else, just Melbourne?
Just Melbourne. That's the only quarantine headquarters that we've got.
For dogs?
Yes.
And cats, obviously.
And cats too. It is a problem in Australia because there's a lot of people who won't come here because of that. I would never put my dogs into quarantine for 10 days. This is why we don't travel outside of the country, and we don't have plans to with while we've got dogs.
Do you think they're happy on board the boats?
I think so. I really believe, like they say, a dog is man's best friend, and it's true. Like our dogs are happy where we are, but I'm going to also say that when I took Max and Mel to land, and Harry too now, I can't forget Harry, when I take the dogs to land, I see them light up. I know the dogs, and I know that there's the richness in the smells of the grass where other dogs have been. And
the wide open spaces.
Yeah, the wide open spaces, and they can run and stretch their legs. And that's why I will always travel in a way that the dogs have that at all times.
If they're going to have them on the boat, you've really got to also give them some land time.
I believe, yes, I believe. And that's just through watching my dogs and other people's dogs as well. You just see there's a spark that comes into them that is different to being on the boat.
Do they bolt?
Depends on the dog. Mel would.
How are they with other dogs, in marinas with other boats and other dogs? How do they cope?
Well, you've got dogs who will bark, and I guess you're living in a tight community and your neighbours are right next to you. So dogs can be protective of their environment. So some dogs might be barking who are saying, you know, you're right beside my boat and who are you? Or they bark because they've been left on their own. And this is probably a big thing for boaties, is that we're with our dogs all the time, 24/7. And then we come into a marina and we go off and we do different things. So our dogs are left on board and it's a new way for them to be. So they're going to bark because they want to know where you are.
They feel abandoned.
They do. They feel abandoned. So there can be that separation anxiety that creates a bit of a barking problem in marinas. Yeah,
I can see that. Maybe it's a good idea to have two.
I'll tell Anthony you said that.
Is it a good idea to have two? Depends on the dog, I suppose.
It depends on the dog, it depends on the boat, and it depends on the individual. I think that's probably the main thing. I have a friend who has 3 Weimaraners. So they're big, tall gun dogs, and they've been travelling with 2 and they just got a 3rd one, and they go in the dinghy, rain, hail or shine, 3 times a day to land. To my friend, it's not a problem. Whereas me, I struggle with a 7-kilo dog getting...
Well, I was going to ask you, should you have a small dog on a boat?
Well, with Max and Mel, they were around 15 kilos, and I always needed Anthony's help to get in and off the dinghy. We've got quite a high freeboard. We're a canoe stern, so it can be challenging for me, myself, to get from the mothership into the dinghy. But... yeah, with Harry, 7 kilos now, I tuck him under my arm and I feel safe and I know that he's safe. So for me, a smaller dog has been perfect. But I think if you've got the right boat with great access off the back transom, a good duck board to get from the dinghy, I think, yeah, you can have any size dog.
There are some things you can buy that help you get a dog off a boat, aren't there?
Yeah, there's different harnesses that you can put on the dog, and
then just lower it over the
That's
side.
right. Yep, you get one of the halyards and clip them up and winch them over, and people do that. You look for ways that are going to help the dog so that they won't hurt themselves.
Dogs are good. They trust you and they get used to something. It doesn't bother them.
That's right. Yeah.
Now, what about cats? I know cats aren't dogs, but should people have cats on board a boat? People have associated with shipping with cats for years. You know, cats might like a bit of an adventure too.
Well, there are quite a few cats on board. We have is it okay to say a token cat?
No.
And she's a rag doll, and her name is Poppy, Poppy, Queen of the Coral Sea. So,
This is your cat?
No. So this is a friend's cat. But I've met quite a few people with cats, and the cats seem to be quite versatile. They're more flexible. They manage themselves better on uneven surfaces. The cats actually seem to do quite well. But I don't personally have a cat.
No, but people do have them. And they put the little harnesses on them and everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they're also safely on board, and all the toileting and all the feeding, and it's all fine.
Yeah, they've got their kitty litter tray. I even met a woman on one of the islands here on the Gold Coast, and the only way you could get to it was through a water vessel. And I said, and she had a cat, a black cat on a lead. And I said, where did you come from? Oh, the cat, she comes on the sup with me. So, yeah, it's amazing. I think it's how you bring the cat or the animal up. And I believe it has a lot to do with who you are as well.
And if they trust you.
And I often say to people, if you're coming onto the boat, especially when you're introducing the dog or the cat, when you're coming onto the boat, don't come on and bring on your anxiety or worries or concerns, because they pick up on that.
Yes.
We know that this is a fact. And so when you're introducing the animal on board, to go there calm and no arguing, you're there to be with the dog.
Should you do it in little pieces?
Yes.
Should you just step by step, like half an hour a day?
Absolutely.
So how would you recommend people introduce their pets, cats or dogs, to a life of sailing?
So I would, and we did this with our own dogs, and that was to take them down to the marina, and that's as far as we got. We got to the marina, they sniffed around, we walked down to the boat, sniffed around, and then we went home. The next time we came down, we bought their beds. So they had beds, they had toys, blankets, and we popped those onto the boat. We took them on the boat, let them sniff around, spent maybe half the day, no motors, no boat working. It was just about them feeling comfortable. So, and we watched them, if we're relaxed, they relaxed as well. So that was the second time. And then each time after that, it was building on each experience. So we'd start the motors. But while we started the motors, it was making sure that, it's fine, good boy,
you'd make a
good
fuss
girl.
of the dog,
So
they associated the motor with fun times.
That's it. And we've done the same thing with Harry. Harry thinks it's time to play when the motor gets turned on.
That's the way you do it.
So, and then it's movement, slow movements. Don't go out for a week. We went out for a few hours and then come back. So it might seem like taking little tedious steps, but in the long run, you want your dog to be able to enjoy years on the boat. So have patience and take these steps to build upon each time you take the dog into the next step of his boating life.
Is there anything that people do that you wish they didn't do?
Well, there's a couple of things. So one of them here in Australia is we are bound by a lot of legislation, especially up our coast with all the marine parks and national parks. And I often see people breaking those rules and letting dogs off leads where they're not meant to be. This can cause problems. So what I would like people to do is abide by the rules that are currently there and bring them to my attention, because I do believe that as a collective, we have a better opportunity to maybe question these rules.
What sort of rules are you talking about?
It's rules about where your dog can and can't go on shore. So there seems to be this misconception, and in some places it is true, but it's not always true, where your dog is allowed below a certain watermark. But in some cases, that is not the case. So I plan on bringing all of this information together, but it varies from region to region. It's a big task, but I will do it.
I'm sure you will.
But in the meantime, there are a lot of government resources that you can go on to.
In Australia, each state has its own dedicated website where dog owners can easily find out the local do's and don'ts. And unfortunately for dog owners, particularly ones who do the right thing, you cannot take your dogs inside a national park.
I know this is a contentious issue, and I understand why people are upset that their dogs can't go to shore. But unfortunately, we have some people who just break the rules they take it to the extreme. So the dog is chasing wildlife, the dog is doing its business and not being picked up. And this is where it spoils it for everybody else. So it would be great to be able to have an opportunity to lobby where we can find a way for dogs to be able to go on to shores they can't at the moment, but in a way that is safe for the environment and for the dog and the wildlife.
Is it signposted in these places? Are there signs up that says you cannot bring pets ashore and people are ignoring these signs? Or is it up to the boat owners themselves? They've got to find out before they get there.
Well, a bit of both. So some of the national parks are signposted, But then, yeah, there's a lot that as boaties you're kind of pulling up in these isolated spots that you may not know. We learn a lot through word of mouth as we're sailing up the coast.
You want to be a responsible dog owner and a
that's-
responsible boatie.
That's right, absolutely.
And you also have some other concerns about how people keep their dogs on boats.
I do worry when there's no lifelines on the boat. That's probably a big thing, and I see the dogs roaming around. But then I say that, and I see also dogs that have done this for years and who are fine. So it's kind of a hard thing.
Now, your love of dogs and your love of boating has lent you to create this community. You have YouTube and Instagram and Facebook and webpage. What sort of people are part of your community?
So we've got people who have their dogs on boats. Even though it's called Dogs Who Sail, we also allow motorboats to come. we're not buyers. Yeah, so we have people who have their dogs on the boat, or people who are planning on buying a boat who want to be part of a community to learn from. Yeah, we've got those two major groups that make it up.
And these are people all around the world?
It's all around the world.
And they are sharing their photographs and their adventures. They're sharing them with the other people in your community.
Yeah, so we've come up to nearly 3,000 members, and that's over 5 years. And it's a really lovely, supportive community. So it's to me, it's not about the numbers. It's about having a group of people who love dogs and who really care about each other and want to make sure that we're all going to have a great experience.
Just to tell everybody out there that it's called Dogs Who Sail. There is Instagram.
Yes.
There's Facebook.
Yes.
There's a web page.
Yes.
And what else is there?
And we're just getting started on a YouTube channel called Dogs Who Sail TV. So that is going to be a really great space where I interview specialists in dogs. So I've already got some interviews with a beautiful vet, Sheridan, from Vet Tales Sailing Chuffed, also the head trainer for Assistance Dogs Australia, to talk all around the toileting issues. But then I've got lined up quite a few interviews with members. So it gives them an opportunity to talk about their experiences with their dog on the boat.
We can all learn from each other.
We can. And even though, there are quite a few people out there who do YouTubes and blogs about their dog, and I encourage people to read them, but I think what makes us unique is that it's not that one dog. You are learning from a whole different range of people with different sized boats and different breeds of dogs.
Different sized dogs.
Yeah, it's a real, you get to hear a whole story.
That sounds great. Now, I want to thank you, Tanya, very much for all your time. I'm sure all the pet lovers out there have enjoyed hearing from you.
My boat won't take me any other way. Sailing to you.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, you can support my work at Buy Me a Coffee. Go to Buy Me a Coffee and click on to Yachting Yarns. And that's it for this episode of Yachting Yarns. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.